Hello, Genre Committee members. This is Dwayne Johnson Cochran, and I am the chairman of the Genre Committee at the Writers Guild of America West. And I'm joined here with my vice chair, Kelly Jo Brick. And we are very happy you are here today for a very special edition of Conversations in Genre. We have a very, very fine conversation to present to you tonight. And before we start, I will throw it over to Kelly Jo to give us some information about the Genre Committee. Kelly Jo.
Yeah. Welcome again, everybody. Yes, thank you so much for coming out and joining us tonight for this conversation. The Genre Committee is bringing you this event. We celebrate all things genre, from sci-fi and horror to comedy, romance, action, you name it. Big thanks before we get started to Greg Mitchell, our guild liaison, for all he does behind the scenes. And also an incredible thank you to our panelists tonight for sharing their experiences and advice with us. It's greatly appreciated. Dwayne, back to you.
Thank you, Kelly Jo. The Genre Committee is presenting the Conversations in Genre panel series tonight, featuring Christopher McQuarrie and Christina Hodson. And we are very, very happy they're here. And our moderator for this evening is Phil Pirrello, and he will lead us through the conversations in genre with these two fabulous and accomplished filmmakers. Take it away, Phil.
Thanks, Dwayne. Like Dwayne said, my name is Phil Pirrello. I'm a WGAW TV and features writer on my better days. And I just want to thank everyone for coming out to our panel, and a big round of locker room high fives to Dwayne and Kelly Jo for helping make this happen. And especially to Greg, you are to this group what antimatter is to a starship, my friend. We could not run any of this without you. So thank you so much. And well, for the last decade or so, tonight's panelists, they've taken on supervillains, fifth-gen fighters, time loops, Decepticons, Paramount's revolving C-suite. They've done it all. And they've done so with character-first stories that are fueled with big emotional stakes, told on the backs of characters you laugh with and never at. And also, one of them has done it seemingly without a shortage of aircraft to dangle some of those characters from. And now we're going to get into how they do all that, from writing process to tips on how to address notes, all of it. It should be a really good panel. Our first guest is a writer-producer who counts among her credits two of the best times at the movies you could have in the history of ever, Bumblebee and Birds of Prey, Christina Hodson. And our next guest is the Oscar-winning screenwriter of Usual Suspects, the director of the last 4 Mission Impossible films, and the guy largely responsible for a decade's worth of Tom Cruise running memes, Mr. Christopher McQuarrie. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Now, I'm curious, what part of the filmmaking process for the two of you, outside of writing, do you feel has maybe helped you become a more effective writer? Like, was there maybe an experience you had in post-production or in a marketing meeting that, changed your process or unlocked something new for you?
I will jump in and say that I started as a development executive. I think that was honestly like a hugely, hugely helpful place to begin my career. Taught me how to take notes, which I think a lot of writers often struggle with. Had to go through the hard process of firing writers as an executive, which is always tricky, but it makes you realize like why writers get fired and how we can be on the other side of the table. And sometimes the notes you're getting as a writer, sometimes the notes you're getting from executives seem painful and stupid, and you tell them to leave you alone. The note is something to glean from what they're saying, and being able to manage that conversation and manage the egos in the room is unfortunately a big part of the job of being a writer. If you want to stay on the project, it's a big part.
Probably for me, it's editing. Learning about editing. I actually learned more from editing and producing another director's film than I ever did from directing my own, and learn more about writing from editing than anything else. And once I directed several films and started to look at what were the parts about directing the movie that I didn't like or was most frustrated by, they tended to be rooted in the way scenes were written. that I could affect coverage, I could affect cinematography, I could affect things by how I wrote things on the page.
So was that, can I ask, was that something you'd written, then someone else had directed, and you came
It was
back?
something I wrote that someone else directed that, and then I ended up as a producer on the film, and then ended up spending about a year in the editing room editing.
Trying to fix it.
Yeah, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. Learned a lot. Learned a great deal.
I bet.
Hugely valuable experience. Painful. Wasn't pleasant, but it was very,
Been
very.
there.
I have no doubt.
So, Christina, you had just said a moment ago about, managing those egos when it comes to the notes process. I'm just curious, like, what is an example of maybe a challenging note that you faced, and how did you deal with or address that? On either side of it, on the exec side or the writer side.
Yeah, I can tell you on the exec side, one of the hardest things to get through was a spec script from a young writer that was fantastically great. We knew there was a movie in it, which is really rare, I think, when you find a spec from a basically brand new writer. And every time we would give a note like something, or like, why is this happening in this country? The answer was just like, because it's cool. And it was always like, I just kept thinking like, please lie to me, come up with any reason. And I think it definitely has helped me, like when I'm getting notes, often they're asking you questions about why things are there, or wanting to change things. And if you can explain the reasons why it's important to you, often it will help you reach a place in the middle. Often the thing that they're asking for, if you explain why you did it the way you did it, it's not that you're saying we have to stick with the way I did it, but you're explaining why you chose that thing.
Right.
Often I find that's a good way of coming together and finding the alternative way forward.
It's really helpful. That's good. And Chris, what about you? Is any example of something in the notes process and how you reacted to it?
Yeah, I learned a long time ago. It was articulated quite succinctly to me very, very recently. Guillermo del Toro was talking about notes, and he said, there are no bad notes, there is only bad articulation, which I thought was very well. I had advocated for a long time that there are no bad notes, which is a very unpopular position. And I was given a note once in a studio meeting, and it was kind of ridiculous. It was almost comedic. And my writing partner and the producer and I all got in the car, and we were in hysterics, making fun of the note all the way home, and making up skits about bad examples of how to execute the note. And when all of that cleared, I said, well, what if you had to take the note? Because it was a spec and we owned it. I said, but what if we did not own this? This was a job for hire and you had to take the note. How would you do it? And we rolled up our sleeves and addressed it very seriously, and found ways to make that note our own, to say, okay, the literal note is ridiculous, but what is the spirit of the note? And ultimately what we learned to do is look not at the literal note, but what the note is reaching for. And the soul of every note is, help me like your screenplay.
Yeah.
Whether or not that person knows how to articulate that, that's what they're searching for. And if they were writers, they would give you a writer's note. So it went from a place of desperately searching for bad notes or good notes among all the bad notes, and looking more at, oh, this is somebody who does not know how to write or understand what the impact of that note is, to understand how ridiculous the note is. It's you just look beyond that and say, okay, what emotion are they reaching for? What's the question behind the question? And that changed everything for me. That now the only thing I stress out about, and I cannot help it, it's a Pavlovian response, is when I get a note, my mind immediately reacts to the amount of work that note will generate. And
Yeah.
and you're just cringing because you're just like, A, this is going to be so much work, and B, it's never going to be in the movie. As a writer, you are able to make those calculations so quickly, and you're able to go through, and chances are you've incorporated that note in the process of reaching the point to the draft that you're handing to them, that you're just making these instantaneous decisions of going, this is horrible and it's never going to work and it's going to waste tons of my time. And you have to repress your emotional response to that, which I am unfortunately very, very bad at.
Hard to keep a poker face in something like that.
I'm the worst poker face there is. I get very animated. I get very, only because it's not about a passionate defense of whatever is there. I've learned after having done this for 30 years, check your certainty. When you think you're right, you think you absolutely know the truth, the audience is going to, they're going to correct you. You're going to find out things that you thought worked absolutely, or what was a slam dunk, or a slam dunk of an idea, or how something certainly had to be, or what was clear. The audience they're going to tell you the truth, and they're going to keep you real. So I don't hold on to anything. What I've learned is the more you tend to let things go, the more they tend to come back. What I get most anxious about is just time, and that this note is going to take a long time. It's going to delay whatever this process is, or it's just going to take that much more time and effort to get to a place. And in meetings on the last two films, I found myself in those situations more and more, and I learned in safe company to be able to say, you're all going to come to this conclusion eventually. Here's where it's going to end up. I'll go down the road with you. You just have to understand, like the same thing with the note, where you understand what the problem is, but you're the writer, and you're the only person who does this day in and day out. And so you just have to be patient, and you have to understand, for other people, it's going to be what is for you an instantaneous calculation is for other people a process, and they just have to go through it, and you just have to, it's like teaching your child how to tie their shoes. Sooner or later, you're just going to have to sit there patiently and let them do it.
Yeah. I think it helps if you're Mr. McQuarrie. People will trust you a little bit when you say, like, I know where this is going to end up. I mean, hopefully they do. They
He's shaking his head.
But I think you're
Hey,
right.
Joe, I would love that. I would love it. And I'm frankly glad they don't. I'm honestly very glad they don't, because the number of times I have been absolutely certain and absolutely right, only to discover that I was absolutely wrong. It's all a process, and those people within it, those people that you find most frustrating and who are asking those questions and are slowing you down, are actually they're riding a brake that can very often be stopping you from hurting yourself. It forces you to look honest. Because look, let's be honest, it all comes down to the same thing. It comes down to budget and time. And it all comes down to, we have to get this done by such and such a time with these resources. And you can very easily talk yourself into things being the right way to go, because we all, in the end, we all want it to be done, and we all want it to be great. And we can all delude ourselves into thinking something is the right solution. And the reality is you have to analyze it. You have to field check it. It's healthy to do those things. It's boring. It can be really exhausting, but there are times when it's absolutely vital.
Yeah. I also think just at the development stage, not saying, even if you are so sure, as you say, that the thing is wrong, not saying no in that notes meeting, taking it on board. You don't have to have a complete poker face, but taking it on board and saying you're going to think about it, and then genuinely thinking about it. Because I've had the same experience where you hear the note and you're like, God, that's dumb and annoying. Why don't you understand the domino effect that's going to have on the rest of the script? And you kind of beat out the domino effect, and you think you're an idiot, you're an idiot, you're an idiot. And then you get to something at the end of Act 3 and you're like, oh, I kind of like that domino effect. And yes, it's more work, and yes, it's not necessarily what you're expecting, but sometimes there's something really good that comes out of it.
I
honestly,
never would have gone there.
hardest at the moment. Being wrong is wonderful.
Yeah.
That's
Like
great.
when you get a note and you think it's bad and then it turns out to be good, it's such a delightful surprise because it unlocks a thing you never would have thought of.
Yeah.
That's great. So even if you disagree with the note in the room, just say, "Yeah, I'll give that a think, go back and try to process it.
Mm.
Don't negate
Yeah.
it right there."
The thing I've learned about no is a diplomatic failure. No is I don't allow myself no. There are three responses to everything. There's yes, if, yes, but, and yes.
Mhm.
Um,
That's great.
what you're saying is they give you a terrible note. Yes, we can do that if you accept these things, or
Mhm.
if you're willing for these that's the one good thing about being a writer and being able to make those calculations very, very quickly. You're able to say, yes, but this will happen if we do that. Is that where you want to go? And all I do is present to people the consequences of their choices. And one of the great things about
Mhm.
us not wanting to do that work, most people in the room don't want to do that work either. And when you
Right.
present them with more work, chances are they'll run away from it. You can always count on people to take the shortcut.
So present it more like a if then.
Yes. Yes, if.
Great. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And for those watching, if you have any questions for the panelists, please submit them via the Q&A icon that's in the lower corner of your screen, and Greg will be feed them to me later in the chat. So moving on to like the industry in general, from your guys' perch, from your view, what do you feel that buyers are looking for right now? What are you hearing that people want? And how do you navigate those demands at a time when the industry seems like weapons grade averse to risk?
I am hoping Christina answers this question, and I'm going to write down her answer.
I was just gonna say, I really hope I don't have to deal with this. What do people want right now? Who knows? I don't know, and I certainly won't pretend I've got my finger super on the pulse. The one thing I will say that is true now, which is true always, is that the industry is so reactive.
Right.
Executives are reactive. People see a thing one weekend, it works, that's what they want the next weekend. You have to keep that in mind, but you also, honestly, I just worry about what do I want to write? What do I care about? What am I passionate about? If you try and chase trends too much, I think you can lose your mind. Also, it takes so long to write a thing that by the time you finish writing it, everything's changed. And one movie came out last weekend and failed, and now immediately none of those will ever get made. So, you know, Margot and I for Birds of Prey pitched the concept of an R-rated superhero movie and were basically laughed out of the room. And only for 2 weeks later, like Deadpool comes onto tracking and is doing fantastically. And it's like, oh, we should definitely do an R-rated superhero. Like everything changes so fast that I think you just personally, I believe you have to kind of stick with your own compass. Obviously, I would say if you're trying to get a movie made and you're starting out as a writer, I probably wouldn't do a really expensive straight drama, for example. I would kind of more think about like targeting yourself for the market rather than trying to think big picture, what's the market looking for? Look at what could potentially get made. When I first had to sit down and write my first spec, I deliberately sat down and wrote a contained horror thriller that I knew could be made for $1 million because I thought, I'm a no one who's going to take a chance on me. $1 million chance is easier. And it helped. So that's kind of how I would think about it more, but I wish I had the answers for what the industry is looking for.
I am sitting here because I did not take the advice of a producer who told me specifically not to write Valkyrie. When we were in Berlin, we were touring the city for another movie because there was a tax rebate in Berlin, and we went to the Bendler block where where the real story ended. And I knew little bits about it, and I had always been fascinated by it, and said I'd love to make a movie about that. And he said, his name was Bobby Newmeyer. He's a great guy, and he said, but you're not going to do that. And I said, why not? And he said, well, they're all. First of all, it's a World War II movie. Nobody wants to make a World War II movie. Second of all, they're all German. They all fail and they all die. Sorry, it's a spoiler for everybody who hasn't seen the movie. And I said, yeah, but it's a great story. I put an expletive in there. I was like, it's a great story. And I went about writing that script with Nathan Alexander. And we actually wrote another script at the same time called The Last Mission, which was the Japanese version of Valkyrie. And that has sat in a script, that sat in a drawer for 20 years, along with another script that everybody told me not to write, which was a biopic about John Wilkes Booth. And in the process of working in the world I've been working in for the last almost 20 years, I became more and more convinced that those were things that you could not get made, and they've been sitting in a drawer collecting dust, and that the business was the way that it was, and that Valkyrie was a fluke. And when this last mission was done, I went into my old script drawer and dusted off all these things that I hadn't read in decades. And it was like elves showed up at my workshop and wrote screenplays for me. They actually were, with time, they had become incredibly relevant, incredibly timely, in very, very, very current and contemporary, and are gaining traction now. So what I would say is the big thing I would say to writers is not to restrict yourself in what you write. It's to not put all of your eggs in that one basket. The number of years that I went to the Austin Film Festival and ran into the same writer with the same dream screenplay that they were still trying to get people to make, as opposed to you work in volume. You finish that script, put it in a drawer, put it out there, and get ready for rejection. Everybody's going to reject it because it's not the thing that everybody is making, and because it's not the thing that everybody is making, that's the reason you did it, and the reason you were right to do it. But also, when I came back to these scripts 20 years later, I was a different filmmaker. I was a different person. And so the writer that I was 20 years ago was now sitting in a room with the director that I was today and saying, well, yeah, this all works, but look what you didn't do. And look how you could have edited this on the page to make this much clearer. And look how you could have done these things. And I rewrote both of those scripts in about 3 days
Oh, wow.
with 20 years of perspective. I was able to very quickly go through those scripts and rewrite them and get them camera ready. You're constantly growing, you're constantly developing. And the biggest thing that nobody wants to tell you, and it sounds very, very sad and depressing when I say it, failure is an essential part of this process. It's so critical. It's so important. And success, as my father would tell me, success is God giving you the day off. Like you learn nothing from success at all. And quite frankly, you tend to pick up very bad habits from success. And false readings from success. You think things are successful for reasons
Wrong reasons, yeah.
are not necessary. That's not necessarily why they were successful. And it makes it very, very difficult to repeat. So, and it's another thing people don't do is they do not study success. We all analyze failure. We all obsess about failure and wallow in it. We don't look at things that worked and say, okay, why did they really work? And where was I right in my estimation, but also where was I wrong? Where were the things within that I thought were going to, where are battles that I lost that turned out to be beneficial to the story?
Yeah. The only other thing I'd add to that, well, first, I'm very jealous of your draw. But second, I think you're right. Like when you write a script, and I think particularly for a lot of writers probably who are listening, who write their first script, get into the guild, they're starting to have a bit of momentum. It's not just that script, if you put it out there, might get rejected. It might succeed. It might get optioned and everything feels great. And then it might be so lucky as to get greenlit. It might be moving ahead. It might be shooting. Keep writing other things. I've seen so many writers who are like, oh, well, you say, what are you working on? And they're like, oh, I wrote that thing and it's getting made. And I was like, but you wrote that 2 years ago. Like, be writing something else. Don't wait for that one to like come out and be a huge win. Like, I would love it if they all came out and were huge wins.
Right.
Sometimes they'll get made, they won't come out at all. Batgirl. Sometimes they'll get made and they'll come out and be terrible failures. But you need to be constantly working on the next thing. If you're lucky enough to have a movie come out, you should hopefully have written a whole bunch of things since you wrote it.
Yeah, God help you when
And I
that
think so
when
often
that movie comes out and that movie is successful. It's a runaway success, and you don't have your next thing ready to go right then and there. I mean, that's the moment. Your movie is never more successful than the day before it comes out. It's never better than the day before it comes out. And when you're in that space, when you're in a space where suddenly you have potential and the town is looking at you, you want to have answers. You want the dream space to be in is the Ridley Scott dream space, where Ridley Scott's just always prepping, always posting, and always producing a movie all at the same time. And as a result, he is bulletproof when movies come out and don't perform. And a movie, there's a million reasons why a movie does and does not perform. The time is the great leveler. You're going to look, whatever is successful now, we're going to look back on those movies 20 years from now and say, well, what are the ones that we're still actually watching, and which are the ones that were a result of great PR, and which are the ones that are actually movies that resonate, that stand the test of time. The thing to be doing in the present is just working in volume all the time, and you're learning that way. You'll go off and write a script and go back to the thing that you wrote and realize things that you could have done to make it better.
Well said. And in terms of your point a bit ago about we don't analyze success, I had a meeting this week with an exec that was dreading the success of Weapons because he thought Hollywood's going to take the wrong lesson from that. They're going to think people want horror Magnolia style as opposed to just an original horror idea that isn't just cookie cutter. I'm curious, like, how do you navigate that frustrating roadblock of exec brain that's what that's the takeaway they see from the success that ultimately could lead to a long-term failure?
Well, you've touched on a remarkable phenomenon that is I think is particular to the era of filmmaking that we're in, which is the concept of dreading success. That is a very real thing, and there are very many varieties of that. It's very possible to be working on a movie and know that your movie is working, and the testing is telling you that, and just your gut when you sit in the room and you can see people around you are actually terrified of that movie working because they are now responsible for that movie being financially, the film works, but now the film has to be financially successful.
Mm-hmm.
So once you've made a movie and the movie tests very high and everybody feels great about the movie, you've done your job. It's now in the hands of another person who could very well fuck that thing up, and it's on them. They would much rather, in certain circumstances, have a film that's okay and they can fix, they can save it, they can put together the marketing campaign that does it, and that's and all of that is an extension of risk mitigation, which has become a very, very predominant force in the industry, and people protecting their position. That that the success of the movie is not in and of itself the thing, is not necessarily regarded as the tide that will raise all boats. And that's a very scary place to be, and it becomes very, very hard to make sense of what people want. I do not speak corporate, whatever it is. I just, they speak a different language and they understand things that I don't. I'm not great in a room with corporate people. And that's because I come to everything from a point of view of my assumption that I felt in my bones was not able to articulate until much later in my career. The assumption is that the industry wants to make the highest quality product for the lowest possible price, for the widest possible audience, for the maximum possible return. Doesn't that sound like a rational thing? No, whether or not you want to make art movies or whatever, but that sounds like what you think the business wants.
Right.
They actually don't. They want control. They just want control of the medium and the artist, and they want to preserve their position. They have so many other things that they have to worry about that the quality of the movie can't always be their number one priority. They've got to fit it into a schedule, and they've got all these, they have so many other complicated things that they have to navigate. And the business has become so constrained and congested because of all of those many considerations that you can't just sit down and have a rational conversation about what will make this movie better. It's lost in this gauzy cocoon of all these other concerns and considerations.
That's
and that-
their job. And Phil, I think your executive friend probably should be scared because he will have to walk into a really annoying staff meeting this week where his boss tells him we should be doing more of this and whatever. But on the writer end, I think all we can do is shore up our work so that it's strong enough that we don't get stupid notes being handed down on scripts that we already have. If you have a horror movie and it's washy enough that you could choose between whether or not to make your next draft like concept driven or Magnolia style, it's probably not a strong enough concept in its current iteration. So I think all we can do is make our work as strong as possible so that it cannot be retroactively pushed into these pigeonholes
Right.
executives are being asked to fill because of how the box office performed last month.
Yeah.
Well said. I appreciate you both digging into that. And both of you have original projects on the horizon. Chris, you have a gnarly movie, Broadsword, which seems to be maybe finally happening. You just talked about Booth. That's a historical drama. That's a genre I wouldn't think the industry would be particularly drawn to, but I'm glad to see that that's getting traction right now. And Christina, you recently sold a pitch with Glenn Powell attached for a firefighter movie. I'm just curious, like, how did the two of you, cut through all the static to get that, aside from being who you are and having the success track record that you have?
I mean, Glenn Powell helps. A movie star always helps, so I won't pretend it was all me, but I think I'd like to think that from the thing that I did on this pitch was like pure passion. I wasn't trying to check a box because I needed to check a box, which I think is often the case with writers when writers are attached to an open writing assignment. And this is how this came to me. Ron and Glenn knew they wanted to do a firefighter movie together. That's all they knew, is that they wanted to do a modern day firefighter movie together. I am a huge Backdraft fan. I happen to be a firefighter fan. And I came to the project and I came to the breaking of the story with like pure love, passion, and excitement. I was itchy to do something original. It'd been a minute. I'd been working in, the studio franchise space for a while, which I'm so grateful for, but it was fun to just be completely off leash. I'm also a crazy person, and when I pitch on these things, I do way more detail than I need to, because I think I need to sell it to myself as well to make sure that I want to take the job. I've made the mistake of accepting a job and doing the deal before I knew exactly what the movie was, and I'm never going to make that mistake again. But yeah, I got to just have fun playing in a sandbox that was completely my own, and then pitch something from the heart that I desperately wanted to see as an audience member. I was like, I haven't seen that movie in a long time and I would like to.
And Glenn Powell is one of the few who gets it. Glenn really gets it. He understands story. He understands collaboration. He's just a very nice guy. He makes everything fun, and not everybody is Glenn, unfortunately. So you're very fortunate to have Glenn in that room, but also there's a reason you're in the room with Glenn. There's a reason you got into that room, which is that speaks to your ability. that's and what Christina's saying is absolutely correct. In the end, it still is down to the star. Whatever the idea is, they're going to be looking for what makes this an event. And if it's not a piece of IP, Jurassic Park makes Jurassic Park.
Right.
Now you're just choosing the variety of Jurassic Park. Is it predominantly in the water? Are they flying this time? Who is the star that's carrying the vehicle of the movie? There are variables in that, but Jurassic Park is that's the reason people are showing up. Jurassic Park is going to put 500 million in the kitty. It's how do we get that 500 to a billion and beyond? It becomes the exercise. When you're dealing with a piece of original material, it all comes down to that star and whether or not that star makes that an event. I have a project I'm working on right now. It's an ensemble. It's a real long shot. It's a drama. It's kind of an intimate story. There is a version of it where if you got 4 actors that are born to play these roles, it would be an event. If you didn't get those 4 actors, it would be a cable movie. It just wouldn't have the same. You could shoot the exact same movie. It just isn't going to have the same Tiffany label on it that it would if you got these particular actors. Knowing that going in, knowing that that's a long shot, the writer that I'm working with, we analyzed it and said, look, here's our dream cast. Who's our number 2? And the drop off from 1 to 2 was absolutely severe. So I just said, what's the stage play version of this movie? If we go to the town and we don't get these 3 actors, these 4 actors, let's not kid ourselves. Let's not compromise and take the step down and make this the movie that everybody's going to forget. You do it as a stage play, then come back to it as a film. We're not in any hurry. We didn't put some timeline on itself. And that's something I see a lot of writers do. They write a script and then their immediate feeling is, well, I have to get this made. I just put all this work in it and I want to get it made. If you're working in volume and you're working on multiple projects at the same time, your odds of one of those things hitting will greatly increase. And the pressure will come off of you of getting this thing made right now. And that thing will end up sitting in a drawer and you'll revisit it a year later or a movie later and realize, wow, I could actually improve this. I could do a whole lot more with it. And then the other thing that's really important, it's a mistake I made very early on. I was developing a project about Alexander the Great. Thank God I never got it made. I did not know what I did not know. If you came to me with that movie now, I'd say, whoa, hold on. It's like, are you sure you want to do this? But at that point, I was like, yeah, I want to make this movie. I want it to be my first film, and I want to be David Lean right out of the gate. There were actors who would have gotten that movie made, and they were not what I considered to be the right person for the role. And I was holding out for somebody who I thought was perfect, and was the next star, but wasn't the star then. Not only was that person not interested in what I was doing, that person never turned into the star that everybody was expecting that star to turn into. And the person that I was saying no to, ultimately ended up as the star of that project for completely different reasons anyway. So now what I do when I look at the project is, okay, here's my dream actor, but if I don't get that actor for whatever reason, who are the next 3? Regardless of whether or not they are right for what I think the role is, who are the 3 that get it made? Just who are they? And it doesn't matter if the role is for a Brit and the only person available is an American. It doesn't matter if the role is for somebody who's 24 years old and the only actor that's available is 54 years old. If you limit yourself like that, if you say that there's only one person that can play the role, then you're never going to make the movie. And if you give into saying, well, this person gets the movie made, I'll make that person correct for that role. I will make this movie work for that person. Yeah, that's when you're working with historical drama, that's not always the option that's available to you. But that also depends on the historical drama. Eric Jenderson and I have been working for years on a project about Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. And he's a very, very, very specific physicality and a very specific character. He's also largely unknown to the majority of people who they don't really know that much about. They know his book, they know The Little Prince. They don't really know that guy. So that's very different than casting Abraham Lincoln, where that's a very specific physical archetype. It's just not getting stuck. It's not getting married to ideas. And one of the funny things that happens is when you let those things go, that actor tends not to work out, and you go through the process and suddenly usual suspects. I wanted Gabriel Byrne. Nobody wanted Gabriel Byrne. I wanted Gabriel Byrne. I thought Gabriel Byrne was absolutely the right guy. And Gabriel Byrne was not somebody who got the movie made for these people who were making these arbitrary lists of people who did get the movie made. And we went through the process of going to all those other actors, and they all passed on it. And eventually it ended up in the hands of Gabriel Byrne, and we ended up with the guy that we wanted. Fate tends to take care of you. And there is inevitably, and I Christina, you tell me if you have never had this experience, the number of times in the movie business where you look back and say, God, imagine if that thing had not gone wrong. Imagine if I had actually gotten the thing that I wanted. What a disaster this would have been. How awful this would have been. The times I had actors on the hook, they didn't do a project, and then I worked with them later and discovered what a nightmare they were and what a nightmare it would have been. Yeah. Trust the fates. They have your back.
Great.
In terms of like the original idea, like I know, Christina, you said, it's very helpful. Obviously, you have a Glen Pal attached, but there are some writers like me, or some writers, listening right now that are at a level where they're unable to get like talent like that attached. So from your experience, like how viable is the original idea right now without those attachments?
I mean, there's two things I'd say. I'd say there are, particularly if you're writing on spec, and particularly if you're writing a genre project, I think the concept can be the star. And I think that we're in a spot right now. We've got things like The Blacklist, where you can write a concept that is catchy enough, where people kind of hook onto it, and that becomes enough of a thing to then drive it. But what I would say that is connected to all of this is that regardless of whether or not you have your star to write for, you have to be writing a movie star role. Like, you have to be writing a part that when an actor of any caliber reads it, they go, fuck, this is good. So often when and I'm sure, Christopher, you have this experience, you're sent scripts, and like I read a script recently that is on the verge of getting made, and I could not tell the difference between the male character and the female character. Their dialogue was identical. Wow. They'd come from completely different walks of life. They had completely different roles in the movie, and their tone, everything about them was completely the same. And I just thought, if I were an actor reading this, I would be so uninspired. Whereas if you look at something like The Usual Suspects, the thing that makes that incredible is there's not a lot of room to service all of those characters. That's a tricky thing to do. And yet each character has a wildly unique tone, voice, feel, so that you can imagine being an actor and reading a part where you only have, a handful of lines comparatively, but you're like, this is the role. I have to play this role. So I think even if you don't have a movie star attached, write as if you're aiming at the biggest movie star in the world. Write as if you're writing something that's so irresistible and distinctive. You have to. It's the only way that you will. Because I think then if you do have an original idea, if the script is really good, you can go that route. You don't have to go straight to buyers. You can start, I mean, if you're lucky enough to have reps, you can start trying to go to talent first to then attach a piece of talent to then sell it?
First person point of view. It's a dying art. It's I was sent a script recently as something that was a potential rewrite. I read the first 30 pages. I could not identify the main character of the screenplay. I didn't know whose story it was. I didn't know there were three potential characters that it could have been, and one of them was the villain. And the fact the villain had more screen time. There were two scenes at the beginning that had characters who were killed during the scenes. So I thought I was following the main character, and I didn't. I didn't understand really what the premise of the movie was until I was 30 pages in. The notion of writing for a protagonist is really a lost art. And when there's a poster behind you right now, there's Raiders of the Lost Ark behind you. There's Out of Sight. There's two amazing screenplays, which the way in which they, oh, sorry, that's Temple of Doom. It's not there.
It's okay.
But the way in which those scripts take the time to introduce you to a character and invest you in that character, and it's as simple as introduce me to a character and show me they have something they care about, and then take that thing away from them. And they'll spend the rest of the movie trying to right that wrong or get that thing back. And if they get it, it's a triumph, and if they don't, it's a tragedy. It's really not any harder than that. You'd be amazed at how many scripts come to me that the only reason I'm being asked to rewrite them is because so much has been done in the story in search of the gimmick, the concept, the hook, the thing that makes it sellable, that they've overlooked the principal thing, which is just like, but I'm not invested in the story. I don't know who these characters are.
I'm guessing the two of you found that a lot of the scripts that come across your desk, they lack some of these fundamental storytelling things. Like
they wouldn't come to my desk if they didn't. The other great one, the one I have a lot of fun poking fun at, is the mystery box storytelling technique. I encourage all of you to keep doing it because you're all keeping me employed. It's amazing. It's an amazing, just keep doing it. Don't stop. Whatever you're doing, just keep writing the mystery box, because then all I do is just undo everything that you did, and everything that you made a mystery, I reveal, and everything you reveal, I make a mystery, and then it turns into what's called a story. Mystery box is a gimmick. And it makes a script readable. It doesn't make it shootable. And the number of times I read scripts that are quote unquote fun reads, and that are those scripts that are circulating around town that everybody goes, oh, this is amazing, and it's got this great concept. And the concept is it's actually making fun of movies, and it's making fun of filmmaking, and it's therapeutic to read for somebody who has to read shitty scripts all day. But it's not a movie. It's actually not. And the truth of the matter is, scripts that are movies are very hard to read. You have to actually actively participate in the reading of them. You have to stop and process what you're reading. You're looking at a blueprint and expecting people to live in it. That's what screenwriting is. It's very, very hard. And when you, let me rephrase that. It isn't. It's hard work, but it's not hard. It's the work is very hard. I don't want to make it sound discouraging, but the fundamentals of screenwriting that people reject all the time, saying, I don't like that because movies do it all the time. Throwing those things out doesn't make your idea original if you don't put something in its place. Tropes are tropes because we gravitate towards them. And there are movies that are genuinely unique, and there are movies that tend to be praised for what they're not rather than what they are. And those movies tend to be the kind of movies where, if you're like me, you're the person scratching your head going, I don't get it. It's hugely, hugely popular, but I don't get it. What's what's happening is it's an anecdote to a trend in the industry. It's being praised for being different, but I promise you 10 years from now you won't be watching that movie. You won't be back revisiting that movie. You will be refreshed by how unusual that movie was, but it's not necessarily something that's engaging and you go back to again and again. What I want to do as a writer is I want to make a movie. My dream is to make a movie that when you finish watching the movie, you would go right back in and you would watch that movie again.
Again.
Keep watching that movie again. Out of Sight, that movie that's behind you, I've watched that movie. I've
Yeah.
watched that. I'm going to put that movie on right after this, right after. It's
I've
a
watched it
wo-
more times. I've had
It's
hot
a
meals.
world I want to be in. It's characters I want to be with. It's a relationship that I want to see work, despite the fact that Scott Frank has created a scenario in which it's impossible for these two people to ever be together, and somehow manages to give me the hope that they will be at the end of that story. It's wish fulfillment. And the thing is that what Scott understands as a writer, your movie is making people want things.
Yeah.
No matter what you do, your movie, even sometimes not intentionally, but your script is making me want something. And there's a certain level of pride among certain filmmakers to make you want something and then not give it to
And
you.
deny.
That's somehow integrity. That's somehow art versus entertainment. It's actually just bullshit. And the truth of the matter is, you made me want something and then you didn't give it to me. And a certain strata of the audience rewards you for that, for not quote unquote going the easy way or doing whatever it is, as opposed to find a way to not, if find a way to reward me and give me what I want, and find a way to do it in another way, but don't make me want something and then don't give it to me. I don't understand that. And
I'm so with you. People do it just to be clever, and it's endlessly frustrating. We as humans, we love stories and we love movies because it ticks it, like it feels right. Like so often, I don't know if you find this, but in the development process, when I'm working with other writers, there's a thing that feels good and a thing that doesn't. It's not. It even just falls on the right page, not because I'm trying to say do this by page. It's that at this point in the movie, I am itching to solve that problem that you set up there. And I want the answer. Yes, I would love it to be given to me in a way that is slightly surprising, but I fucking want that answer. And the people who try and just deliberately avoid that, I think, are setting themselves up sometimes for failure. Like, listen, there's some people who do it very well, but most of the time, and especially I think if you're starting out in your career, don't deliberately avoid giving people what they want.
Or don't make me want that thing. If you don't want
Yeah, sure.
if you don't like the thing that you have to give me, take away the thing that makes me want that.
Yeah.
And I was in a meeting yesterday. I was in a meeting with Doug Lyman, and Doug just kept saying this one thing in the script. He goes, it makes me ask this. And he wanted to go on this whole long journey to answer it. And I go, why don't we just eliminate the question?
Yeah.
Instead of coming up with the answer to the question, let's just get rid of the question, because the question is just not important to our story. Thank you for asking the question. And that's what tends to happen a lot of times. We forget that we wrote the rules that we are tasked with obeying. We forget that there are very few real rules to storytelling, real hard, unavoidable rules that every movie has. Most movies are made up of rules that we made up. And we tend to forget that, and we get lost in it, and we forget that we can unwrite those rules and take those things away. The solution now tends to be what we're talking about, which is they get to a place in the story where something is, I've seen it before, or it's a trope that I don't like, or how many times has a movie done this? And we just throw it out. And by somehow throwing it out, we're making a better film. You're not. You're actually just, you were actually making something very mainstream, and the problem is not in your third act. The problem is in your first act. You set something up that, and if, and that's where everybody wants to make 2001. Everybody wants to make Deliverance. Nobody wants to be Ned Beatty.
Mhm.
Everybody wants to make a movie like Out of Sight. Scott Frank,
Yeah.
I sat down with Scott Frank at the Sundance Writers Lab. He broke that entire movie down and how they made it compared to the book. Elmore Leonard hated what Scott Frank was doing. And
Yeah, we did.
Really?
those characters were a very different age. There was no love story between them. He was a much older guy, a lifetime criminal, and
Right.
Karen Cisco was this young woman. There was no love story. And there was no way to get those characters together. And Scott Frank understood, but you have to. It
Right.
doesn't really matter whether or not I like it or find it. You have to get them together. It's what the story is as a movie. The book is another thing. A book's a completely different. The End of the Natural, when you read the book, he fails at the end of the book. And it's a really great book. It's a depressing movie. It's not a cinematic ending. It's a literary ending, and they understood to take that story and they understood what to change to make that cinematic. Scott Frank understood what to change about Out of Sight to make it cinematic. And when Elmore Leonard saw the movie, he wrote Scott a letter and he said, "You were right, kid."
Awesome.
And talk about a frameable letter, a letter from Elmore Leonard telling you,
Right.
and calling you kid, which is kind of dope. It's looking at those. It's looking at those things and having the presence of mind and having the confidence to say, I'm just going to go a fastball straight down the middle. And what's that going to give me? And the rules of the rules of the kind of movie say you've got to do this. If you're making a Mission Impossible or you're making Birds of Prey, those are different rules. Those are different. It's a different kind of movie for a different audience. The number of times I have come in to help as a consultant on movies where the filmmaker is trying to make the art film they grew up loving without ever going on the journey that filmmaker did to get to that film. And so that when I was with two filmmakers back to back who both had Apocalypse Now hanging in their office as their touchstone, and I sat down with the one guy and went, "Let me tell you, I make Apocalypse Now because it's very, very simple.
Gotta make
easy.
Godfather. Right?
First make The Godfather, then make The Conversation, then make The Godfather Part 2. Win every award imaginable, make tons of money, and basically become the greatest filmmaker who ever lived. First, the greatest hat trick in the history of cinema. You do that, then take all of your professional capital, take all of your personal capital, take the life of your movie star, your marriage, your sanity, go to a place where they're actually fighting a real war and make a movie about a war that's still fresh in people's minds and nobody wants to remember and no one's going to come and see your movie. That's how you make Apocalypse Now. You're not making Apocalypse Now. You're not. That's not to say you can't. I'm one of the few people who's saying you actually can. You can do that. You can't make Apocalypse Now first time out of the gate. I tried to make Alexander the Great first time out of the gate. And the business kicked me in the junk and said, "No, kid, go back and make your little crime film and flop." And now you're going to, the business laughed when the Suspects was a very successful film and it was successful right out of the gate. And that success lied to me and told me that I somehow knew what I was doing and that somehow now I had the power to make whatever I wanted. Not only did I not have the power to make what I want, I didn't know what I was doing. I knew what I was doing in that very, very, very narrow lane with that very specific idea. I still didn't understand the fundamentals of filmmaking, and I didn't understand what we're on this panel to talk about, which is genre filmmaking. And if you're making genre filmmaking, you're specifically setting out to make a blockbuster. That doesn't mean you can't make Seven. Seven is genre filmmaking, and Seven has an ending that everybody said no fucking way.
Right.
That Arnold Kopelson was going, this movie will not end that way, and there was no world in which he was ever going to let it happen, and it did. It did, and if it had ended his way, it would have been. It would not. I would not be talking about that movie right now, nor would I have seen that movie 55 times. But the fact that the movie can end that way, the fact that the movie can end with that kind of bleak ending, that Chinatown can end with the ending that it does, and you still go back and watch that film again, is because those movies made you want the things that it gave you. Those movies were It's not to say, oh, a movie's got to give you a happy ending. No, it's got to give you the right ending. It
Right.
has to give you a
Yeah, the
just
one that
ending.
fits.
That's it.
Yeah.
What people want from movies is not a happy ending. They want justice. They want, and by that I mean something that adheres to the internal justice of that movie. You know, in the first 10 minutes of Seven, the kind of movie you're getting. And Seven delivers on that kind of movie. It signs a contract with you in the first 10 minutes. This isn't going to end pretty for anybody. Chinatown, same thing. It's telling you the kind of movie it is and the kind of world you're in. So when the movie ends the way that it does, you may be hurt.
Yeah.
You may be bummed out. You're not let down by the movie.
It feels right. I think character that internal justice is such a perfect way of putting it. It's the thing that feels right for the people that we've come to love and hate within the movie. And I think that so often with writing genre, writers, especially early in their career writers, actually all writers, I think, often can get so distracted by plot, by trying to pull off a clever twist, by trying to do the end of The Usual Suspects. You can get so focused on the MacGuffin, the this, and the doing the clever plot that no one will see coming and whatever. You're so worried about that you've forgotten about where you want to leave your characters at the end of the movie, like who you want to win and who you want to lose and how it feels for the person that's eating the popcorn who's come to love or hate that person and spent 2 hours with them. The where you leave the characters to me is always going to be more important than the mechanics of how the plot got there.
Right.
Or
Plot
how
is
they defused
reasons.
the bomb or did whatever they did.
Yes. Plot is reasons. It's just the reasons why
Absolutely.
people are doing what they're doing. And it's also, dialogue is a symptom of plot. And the less plot you have, the less dialogue you need. The more dialogue you have, the more plot you probably have. And you can look at those two things as corollaries. And what you and those reasons and logic are death. They are information, and information is the death of emotion. In the 10 years that I spent post Usual Suspects in development hell trying to get my next movie made, not one executive or producer, no one who it was my job to take their notes. No one ever mentioned emotion. No one ever mentioned character. They talked entirely about plot and reasons and logic. And all of those things are very, very, very important.
Yeah.
The same way that salt is important to your diet.
Yeah.
And if you eat 3 pounds of it for breakfast, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
And
That's a
and
perfect
that's what it-
example, though, of what you were talking about, Christopher, with analyzing success and looking at the wrong thing. Personally, I don't think Usual Suspects is a success because of the very clever twist, and it is one of the cleverest twists of all time. It's because of those characters. They're incredible, and what you do with them emotionally and the way you feel with the twist at the end is what
Yeah.
matters. It's not about
it's
the
what the
mechanics.
movie leaves you feeling. But Suspects is a very elaborate setup to a punchline. It's
Yeah.
just what it's all centered around the ending. And if the ending works for you, the movie works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But everything else in the movie is dictated by that ending. There's actually almost no room to maneuver scene by scene because everything exists in support of that. All of the actors who were making the movie came to understand that. They didn't at first, and they were trying to do their actor thing and blow things up. And it was Pete Postlethwaite. And during the pool scene, it was one of the pool room scene where he introduces Kaiser Soze, one of the very early scenes that we were shooting in the movie. And as all the actors were doing their actory stuff, the stage actor said, "Have any of you read the screenplay?"
Yeah.
What are you doing? Like everything you're doing is actually tearing the movie apart. And because Pete had the respect of everyone in the room, and because he was, and because he had the presence that he did, he was able to just go, everybody just calm down and let's focus on that script. It very easily could have all been blown up. But yes, it's exactly what you're saying, Christina. It is the feeling that the movie gives you, at the end. It's the rug pull at the end of that story. That's why it isn't the tightly intricate nature of all of those things. And again, all of those things they were inevitable. I don't want to say they were easy. There were a lot of difficult things to figure out, but they were inevitable. As you were writing the scenes, it just, you couldn't do a lot of this. I'm terrible with a blank page. I'm the worst person in the world to start with nothing. I love a broken toy. You give me a script that doesn't work, and I can look at things and just say, oh, well, if you just did this and you applied these rules and you did all this other stuff. But all of that came from breaking the bad habits I had when I started working with Tom Cruise, who is just Mr. Emotion. He's just, how does the audience feel at the end of this? This is what I want people to feel when they walk away. He is not, here's how you make a Tom Cruise movie.
Right.
He wants you to blow up a Tom Cruise movie. He wants to do something different. But he's also a guy who understands Bob doesn't need more than 50 words to be everybody's favorite character in this movie. You don't need to add more scenes with Bob. Everybody was saying in Top Gun Maverick, we need more scenes with Maverick and Rooster. Because everybody wanted to see those two characters together. And Tom and I kept saying to everybody, if they have one more scene together, they will be the two most annoying characters in the movie, because why aren't they just working out their bullshit? You have to keep interrupting them from having the obvious conversation. It's understanding those things. It's understanding that it's really, to go back to your first question, before editing, the thing that really helped me understand movies more than anything, and it still stays with me to this day, I worked at a movie theater for 4 years as a security guard. I stood in the back of the theater for 4 years and just watched the audience. And I would say to you, go to a movie theater, and ideally don't go to an upscale movie theater. Go to a movie theater where people
Packed one.
go on opening night and go to a movie theater. You're probably a little scared, and that's the world's greatest focus group. They're all going to talk through the movie. Everybody goes and they say, everybody's talking through the film. That's research. That's gold. You're looking at that the wrong way. You should be listening to those people. And more importantly, it's not whether or not they're talking to the screen. When are they talking? Why are they talking? When are they checking their text messages? And why are they checking your text messages? You will learn more about storytelling from an experience like that by repeating that over and over again than you'll ever learn from an executive, than you'll ever learn in a notes meeting. And more importantly, you will, at the end of the process, be in that theater with your movie, with a focus group, and getting kicked in the junk. So
This is very helpful. This is great, guys. Thank you. We're gonna jump to some viewer questions. For the two of you, do you write in sequence, or do you like to jump around when you're working on original projects?
I always write in sequence. I don't know how to write the end until I've written the beginning. I couldn't possibly.
yeah. And the other problem with that is I tend to just jump to the things I want to write and skip all the vegetables.
And then you leave yourself all of the stuff that's not.
Yeah.
So even if you bump into a scene that you can't quite figure out the mechanics of, you stick in it, you don't jump around to one that you do.
Write it badly. Write it badly.
Badly.
That doesn't mean, I mean, look, I will inevitably, especially with the way we make movies like Mission, movies like Edge of Tomorrow. Edge of Tomorrow, I did write out of sequence. I wrote it in shooting order because I came on 4 weeks before we started shooting.
Wow.
I actually had to write in calendar order, but I did know what the structure of the movie was to a degree. We didn't know what the third act was and couldn't figure it out for much of the shooting of the movie. And I actually went away and came back. We then edited the entire film together, and there were giant holes in the story that we had to go back and reshoot and figure out how to do those things, but super efficiently. We reshot a third of Edge of Tomorrow in 12 days.
Whoa.
Yeah, we reshot 40% of World War Z in 20 days. But you can only do that when you know, when you got a movie. You have a movie to look at and go, this is exactly the stuff that I need. Here are the things that I have to have in the story. Now you could be very, very targeted. The bad lesson it teaches everybody is, oh, well, if you did that with 40% of the movie, we could do 100% of the movie in 80 days. Well, no, you're just, it doesn't quite work that way. And it definitely doesn't work that way if what you're doing is trying to hit a release date. If you're starting a movie because this actor is available or the movie has to be out by this time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, there's no way you'll have a finished screenplay. So in those cases, yes, sometimes you end up writing out of sequence, but having a structure, knowing a basic structure, even if it's just a guideline. And for me, always, it's having an ending to write.
Insight.
Knowing how either the scene ends, the act ends, the relationship ends. We did not know the ending of Final Reckoning. But we knew that scene that was the ending, that ultimately became the ending. We knew that scene for a long, long time. We just didn't think it was the end of the movie. And then when I assembled it, I went to Tom and said, we can cancel Saturday because we had scheduled the ending we were going to shoot. And I said, here, just look at this and tell me what you think. And he looked at it and he was like, that's the end of the movie. And we canceled the ending of the movie.
For both guests, when you're putting together a pitch for a new project, do you have a tried and true method or formula or template for your pitches? Or do you use a different process every time depending on the project?
I'm pretty rigid in how I pitch. I mean, it's different. The only thing that I change is the amount of time I will talk for if it's an open writing assignment and something that I know they want to hear specifically from me on, I'll talk longer. But certainly in the in the early years of my career, I never would pitch longer than about 17 minutes.
Wow.
16 was my
That's
sweet
your
spot.
sweet spot.
It was my sweet spot. I would always begin with why me, why this? So that by the end of my first opening bit, they would know why I was undeniably the only person you could hire. So that the idea was that they say yes at the end of the opening paragraph. So I would do why me, why this, then I would tend to theme, and then only then do I dive into story. I know a lot of writers who are very, very different and dive straight in with so we open on. I personally don't like, when I used to be an executive and I was hearing pitches all the time, I didn't want to just hear something without knowing what it was. You never see a movie without knowing what genre you're seeing. So you always have some context. You know a bit, the tone, the theme, that kind of stuff from the marketing and the posters. And I want the person hearing the pitch to have the experience of watching a movie when they hear the pitch. So yeah, that's a little bit my formula.
So you kick off your pitches, whether it's a rewrite or an original, with this is why me should be telling the story, and this is why this story should be told. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. And Chris, what about for you?
For me, it's much more conversational. To me, a pitch relies entirely on who it is you're pitching to. It's an organic thing. You can see where the person you're pitching to is responding to certain things and not responding to others. Right. So I could pitch the same story to 4 different people, and it would come out 4 different ways based on who I was pitching to. And they tend to ask you questions in the midst of it, and those questions are giving you a very strong indication of what they're responding to. And so I try to do that. I also tend to try to do homework on the people to whom I am pitching, to understand movies that they like, places where things they don't like. I have incorporated personal tragedies into stories, like speaking to things that I know this person has experienced something like this. and been very ruthless in incorporating that into the story, and it got a very, very emotional response. And then I got kicked off the movie.
Yeah.
But to me, it's just a very I tend not to prepare a formal pitch.
Oh,
I don't
wow.
think I don't think I've ever written anything down. Um, if in the case of a rewrite, I've read the script one time and I come in and I say, here's what I see are the fundamental strengths of it, and here are the things that I think are the fundamental weaknesses of it. Here are my ideas of how you would approach that. And occasionally I'll pitch scenes and things like that. But I've never really, not never, but it's been a very long time since I have sat down and pitched a beginning, middle, end uh, kind of story. I think part of that, though, is the consequence that a lot of the meetings I've been in tend to be rewrites. They tend to be things that are coming from. I come in to fix stuff.
Yeah.
So that's very different than selling the big idea.
It's a different setup. And also, I think they're so grateful to have you talking to them at that point because they're so desperate for the help that I think you're completely right, Christopher. When it's a rewrite in that way, it's almost always got to be a dialogue and a conversation because they're so far down the line that it is naturally a collaborative thing. I think it is different when you're coming in clean and pitching, and especially again, like when you're a lesser known quantity, you often do have to walk them through the whole movie in a different way.
That's very, very hard. It's hard. It's really intimidating. I'm producing on something right now where I heard two writers pitch today. I sat through two proper pitches and it's been so long since I've done it. And then to be in this chair, and of course I'm in the meeting going, who am I? Like, what am I doing in this meeting that this poor guy's got to pitch to me? And they are having to do it over Zoom. That's another thing that writers have to contend with that I did not in the earlier stages of my career. That's not a real pitch when you're doing it on Zoom. You're not in a room with people, and people are not. I mean, you can look at my glasses right now and you could see that I am looking at a computer screen, and there could be any number of things on this computer screen while somebody is pitching to me. And I've got text messages coming up and I've got this and I've got that. You're not sitting in the same kind of space. You're just not tuned in. You're not connected the way that certain people are. So I can't even imagine how people do it now. I'm in my capacity where the rewrite thing and the production fix thing. What I have noticed is that the closer you get to production, when you get into this, there's a magical window of about 4 weeks before they start shooting and 4 weeks after they start shooting, or they will do anything you say.
Yeah.
They will just go like, please, God, save us. They're really, really, really malleable, and they're very receptive to solutions. And that solution can be anything as long as it sounds like a
They
solution.
just want someone who says they know what they're doing.
Whereas there was a guy making a movie and it was just terrible. The movie ended up bombing horribly. It was a really great piece of IP. You had an amazing star. It was all there. And I just came in and said, you just have this one idea in the script that is just choking the entire script to death. It's infantilizing your lead, who's this woman. It's degrading, it's infantilizing, and you've taken somebody who's this amazing woman and you've made them a child, and you're not seeing the forest for the trees.
Wow.
And they said, it's just too late to change anything. And I said, you have 9 months. You can do a page 1 rewrite on this entire thing in 4 weeks. You have no idea how much time you have. And they didn't want to change it. They just didn't want to change it. And I have been on the phone with major directors from eras past, but I mean names like, you got to be kidding me. And their script was problematic, but they were shooting in a couple of weeks and they didn't want to rock the boat. And they made a bomb. They just made a bomb.
And that thing that didn't change, did that go to the screen?
That's it. And and I was just there at the wrong time, or I didn't, in the case of the bigger director, I didn't have a voice of authority. I didn't have a track record to convince them. Um, and in the case of this other, it was a director who was much more, they just, they cared more about style than they did about story. Look, this is a real scary reality for everybody who's listening to me. Not a lot of people understand the stuff that we're talking about. They don't understand it. It's a mystery to them. And as a result of it being a mystery, it's just something they would choose to avoid rather than coming back to the issue of control, rather than surrender that control to somebody whose department it is. That is why writers end up being treated the way that they are. We are a living reminder of everyone's impotence. They're just, if everybody could write screenplays, they wouldn't need us. And here's what's so amazing. I can't understand how people can't just sit down and physically write a sentence. It's the easiest thing in the world to do. It may not be the best sentence, but the times that I have been in a room, there was one director in particular who wanted writing credit on a film. And I just said, write one line. Just go ahead and write one line and I'll give you credit on this movie. And he couldn't do it. He could not physically do it. That's the power of everybody in this room. You can do so. You have a superpower. You can do something that other people have some sort of physiological barrier that does not allow them to do it. It also breeds enormous resentment because you represent a dependency that is not a movie star or a director or a financer. It's a dependency on a person who doesn't technically get the movie made, who isn't somebody who's got heat. We're all nerds at the party that just everybody got here because we drove, not because they necessarily thought we were cool and wanted us at the party. I revel in that. I've just learned to relish that and learn to be comfortable in the fact that I'm actually not wanted in the room. My opinions are not welcome. You're Cassandra. You're giving them all the bad news. You're the one saying it doesn't really work. It's going to take 3 weeks longer than you wanted it to. If you want this movie to be good, you're going to have to kill the one thing. We're naysayers, and we're full of negativity, and we're full of bummer truths and just shit people don't want to hear. Embrace that. Wrap yourself in that and know that that's your lot in life. And if you're here to be popular, you're going to be very, very happy. But the big thing I tell writers all the time, and we were talking about this at the beginning, where we were talking about your screenplay. One of the things, I never set out to be a rewrite guy. I remember my first rewrite job was on a terrible movie that went absolutely nowhere. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was not qualified to do it. The future belongs to the writer producer. The future belongs to the writer who understands the physicality of how movies are made and the nuts and bolts of how to fix them. And that's going to put you in a very different position than just a writer. As a writer, you're on your own, you're isolated, you're vulnerable. As the writer producer, as the person who's there in the room going, okay, here's the problem and here's how to fix the problem. What you're selling then is not your screenplay or your idea. You are selling your ability to write movies and to solve their problems. You have this untapped, unexploited power to physically write something that's a strength that's totally underestimated. If you can convert that, if you can take your ability to sit down and just write 100 pages of something when other people can't write a paragraph, if you can then understand the nuts and bolts of filmmaking and how to serve people who can't do that, you will become invaluable to the process. You will go from being the writer they bring in for a week, they throw them out, they bring in another week, another writer, they throw her out. You go to being a person that's just like, shit, don't leave. And then what
Right.
and then what you do in that position is do everything you can to get out of the room. You do everything you can to get off the job as quickly as humanly possible, which is counterintuitive to everything we're taught as writers. As soon as I started to get out of the room, I never stopped working. when I spent my whole career I want to get this movie made, I want to get this script produced, all I was doing was going from person to person and asking for permission. I was just asking for permission. And as a writer, I was asking for permission for them to take my movie and give it to some other director who doesn't know how to direct my movie and let them direct it. Get out of that mindset. You have this superpower that, and whatever anybody's telling you about AI, it ain't going to happen that soon. It's not going to happen that soon. It's not going to replace us that quickly because AI has one thing, lacks one thing currently. It lacks one thing that every single person in this room possesses, which is empathy, which is the other thing. I have never heard a film teacher, I have never heard an executive, I have never heard a director ever talk about empathy. And if you really, and that's why I would tell you to go and study the audience and sit in that theater, because when you have empathy for your audience, when you can be the audience, that's where the real process of filmmaking begins. Everybody loves to say writing is where the process begins. It's not. It's understanding the process of filmmaking is where writing begins. It's really understanding how your words get translated into film and translated into actors saying it. And it's written on the page, it's written in the Avid, and it's written on the page, it's written on set, and it's written in the Avid. It's written many, many, many times. And you will be rewriting it in ADR up until the day they take the movie away from you. The real art of writing is understanding the craft of filmmaking and how best you can insinuate yourself into that and solve other people's problems. And your career will be happening in the background while all that's going on.
Right. Well, I think you got a lot of virtual fist bumps on that superpower bit. So thanks for saying that. One last question. There's a process studios have been using recently of employing a small writer's room to help structure or break a story or fix a script. And Chris, I think you had that experience maybe on Rogue Nation.
We had 3 guys come in and sit around a table and try to break story, but
okay.
Yeah.
Well, the question is, do any of you have experience with this sort of room? And how does a writer potentially get into a room like that on a studio project?
I've got lots of experience on it, and there's all sorts of different ones, and some are good and some are bad. I was in one of the first rooms that they did for kind of creating universes. It was the Transformers universe one where 12 writers came in and were meant to be, I mean, it was nine writers because some of them were pairs. But we're trying to write 9 completely separate movies and create a universe. The year later, I think Universal did it with Monsters. There's good and there's bad. What you're, I think, more talking about, which is more likely, is the writer's room to fix things. So that's where projects often in development, there are brief punch-up ones where a movie's about to shoot. I don't think those are as interesting. I'll put a pin in that. The one that there are all the time is when a script's in development, a studio knows they have a property they want to do, they've had a draft or two, it's fine, it's not great, they're wondering whether or not they just need a rewrite or a page one, and they put together a room.
Gotcha.
The good ones have the writer already hired to do the job, and then they're looking for other writers to come in and opine. The bad ones, they're like, I don't know, come in and let's all just see what happens. And those days tend to just be a waste of time because you chase 5 different things and there's no one leading the conversation. The best way to get into those rooms is to have a really good spec, but also give good general. Like, people underestimate, and it's hard, Christopher, you talk about Zoom. Zoom sucks because you don't get a feel for people. As much as you can, volunteer to drive to the studio. It may be annoying for you to sit in traffic. It may suck that you have to drive back and forth in a day. Do it as much as you can. Get yourself in front of people. Show them that you are quick on your feet, that you're collaborative, that you like talking, that you are someone that is easy to spend a day with. Because those are the people that get called up and say, like, hey, spend a day with me. We'll have lunch, we'll talk about story. So yeah, I think have a good sample and meet people as much as possible. Don't say no to the water bottle tour.
And be easy to fire.
Even if, by the way, even if the meeting feels like it's beneath you, sometimes it's like, this CE at the company wants to meet you, and you're like, well, I've already met someone more senior. it's often the CEs and the more junior people who are putting together the lists for who's going to be in those rooms.
And yes, and be really easy to fire. It's coming.
Yeah.
It's inevitable. It's going to happen. It's not your fault, and they hate doing it. And the easier you are to fire, the faster you will be rehired by those people for no other reason than he was really easy to fire. Let's bring him back. It's just removing one painful part of the process for them. And the number of times I have picked up the phone and knew where the call was going and just said, "Listen, I get it. I'm on a plane. I understand. Just
Graciously.
just take the work off their plate for them, and it will pay dividends. The gratitude of that." And in one instance, I got fired by a director off the movie through the director didn't do it. The executive called because the director couldn't, and I saw it coming. We had a very charming conversation about it.
Wow.
Within days, the director was fired, and I was back on the movie. And it's just you would be amazed at the importance of manners, just having manners, and not
Massive.
there's no way to not be emotional about it, but to learn to not let your emotions get the better of it, and to remember that today's disaster is tomorrow's benefit. To something that's happening to you today that seems like the end of the world is going to turn out in ways you can't possibly predict. And we as writers tend to look at we're all very proud of the battles we've lost, and and we take it on the chin, and our careers are a long litany of the things that have been done wrong to us, and the way we've been and this guy screwed me over, and that director. It's taking all of that in stride and understanding that that's all part of it, and the pain you feel is your own shell breaking.
I also think the manners thing you're talking about doesn't just go up and down, it goes sideways. Be good to your fellow writers. When you replace a writer, reach out to them. The way that you treat your fellow writers, that's if you're asking how people get in writers' rooms, it's often through other writers. Like when I get asked to do a room, they'll say, "Who do you like?" And then I'll just name my 3 favorite people to hang out with who are good at this, but who are pleasant. So a lot of it is, it's not just being sycophantic upwards, it's being like a genuinely good, decent person to the people around you and all of your peers that you're coming up with, because they're the ones that will promote you for other stuff.
And to advocate for other writers.
Yeah.
The times that I have written on movies where I've been submitted for credit and other writers haven't, the studios can be, they can manipulate that process and be very, very, they can be pretty unfair about it. The number of times I've written letters to the Guild and said, this person deserves the credit, this person absolutely did this work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It might have cost me a little bit in residuals. The dividends that has paid in the long term, sometimes decades later. I know when I die, there will be 6 people that will carry me to that hole in the ground. And they're all writers for whom I advocated for credit at some point or another. And we are all trained to stab each other in the back. We are all trained to turn on one another, and it's very, very cutthroat, the whole arbitration process. And I understand that the stakes are very, very high. Those dividends are actually not long-term, they are short-term dividends. The long-term dividends are the writers you help out, the people you advocate for. And you never know. When I was working on X-Men, you're talking about, this is 1996, 97. You're talking about ground zero. This is when Marvel was an office on Maple Drive in Beverly Hills.
Wow.
And I'm in a development meeting with any number of executives from 20th Century Fox, none of whom are there. Not one of them is still there. And it was ugly. The meeting was really, really ugly. And we were being handed notes from Ain't It Cool News that had gotten a copy of the leaked script and had written a review of it. And the studio was handing us the notes that were being written by the internet. And when I tell you that meeting It was the ugliest, gnarliest cage fight I've ever been in my life. The one person who's still around was the producer's assistant who had
Mhm.
picked me up at the airport when I had flown into town from Seattle. And his name was Kevin Feige. You
That's
don't ever know
Yeah.
who you're in the room with. You just do not ever know who you're in the room with. And there is somebody in that room, the guy who brought you coffee, the woman who brought you your espresso, or who answered the phone, is one day going to be the head of the studio. They're one day going to be the person writing the checks. And as far as I have come in this business, I'm still a screenwriter. I'm still, it's my, I haven't gone up any sort of executive level. I still have that job, and I still answer to those people. It does not matter to what level you rise in this. They're ultimately the people who are going to decide whether or not you pay your mortgage.
Great. I think we have a lot of takeaways from tonight. Be empathetic, uh, embrace your superpower, and wherever you're going to put in your box, mystery or otherwise, make sure it's worth opening for the viewer. Guys, the stories you've told, I think they're going to help a lot of people in the stories they're trying to tell. And I really appreciate you making the time to talk with us. The two of you are very good at what you do, and thanks for telling us about how you do it. And thanks everyone for tuning in tonight. We really appreciate your time. Been so generous with your time, guys. We really appreciate it. Been a privilege
Now,
talking.
I see there's a bunch of questions here that have been typed out. Are we able to still type answers to those, or is there, or is it going to leave when we close the
I mean,
room?
I'm down with it if everyone else is.
I'm okay for time. I have nothing to do. So
I'm okay for a minute.
Okay. Chris, do you want to just pick one?
sure. Oh, how did I? Let's see. I'm. Some of these are very unusual questions. Um,
We have one about mystery boxes from J.J. Abrams. No, I'm just kidding.
um, so there's a question for Christina. When Christina says, "Why me? Why this?" regarding her pitch process, can she speak to the why this a bit more? Also, thank you so much for.
Oh, hi, Charmaine. No, Charmaine. Why this is like why this movie needs to be in movie theaters now, like why this movie is important. Like I want the execs to know it, like I say, at the end of that opening piece, like why they should be making this fucking movie right now. And then obviously I want me to be the undeniable only choice for it. But I think the two things are important and they go in conjunction.
I couldn't agree more. The why now, you're looking at something and saying, for me, it's what is an audience bringing to the movie? What are they carrying? When the example I use all the time is growing up in the 80s and watching movies like Top Gun and Hunt for Red October, you brought the Cold War to the movie. That movie was speaking to a present day anxiety. With the end of the Cold War, there was a real scramble, like what even was a spy movie after that point? And Bourne Identity ultimately figured that out, and Mr. and Mrs. Smith ultimately figured that out in their way. Mission had to kind of figure out what was the post-Cold War spy movie. When we came to do Top Gun Maverick, the why now was something very specific, and it was a very early conversation we had, because if you couldn't define the why now, it just became a crash grab, and you couldn't define Maverick. And what in the first meeting that I was in, as the only person who didn't work on the original film, the only thing I could bring to the meeting was I remembered what it was to be a 17-year-old kid watching that movie in the theater. I know what I was feeling, and I had decades of perspective on that to be able to articulate it as a filmmaker, to say, here's what I think I was feeling then. And we need to find that analogy for a contemporary audience. It's not the 80s anymore. And that was a real aha moment for me, was finding that when I was reading the script that had been sent to me. And it all came down to one specific scene in the movie, which ultimately turned into the scene with Tom and Ed Harris, where I called Tom and I read him that version of the scene in the middle of the night, and I was like, this is the movie. This is there is a secret ingredient in this scene that I'll never talk about, but there's a secret ingredient in this scene. And because, and if this scene works, the movie works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't.
That's great. That's great. Another question. Can both of you please speak about how you balance incorporating character moments and emotional beats when creating action sequences? And to tag on to that, how any tricks do you have for writing exposition in the context of those action scenes?
Ooh, good question. Christina?
I just wouldn't separate them. I try never to think about action as just action and character as character. I think action has to be about character, like the way people move and fight, the way that people get back up. It's all about character. So I think the important thing that a lot of people forget is that the two are completely intertwined.
Right.
As soon as you start separating them, you get boring action sequences. I think they can be spectacular, but they're gonna feel empty. Whereas if you write from day one, if you're writing your action based on who your characters are, who they've been built up to be throughout the time that you've been watching them, and they make the choices that you understand they've made because of who they were in Act 1, that's going to feel good. It's just going to feel right. And that's what, to me, that's what makes all the difference, especially when you're trying to like get someone to green light a script, is they're reading it and they've got to feel it. And to just read like punchy, never that exciting.
And don't put exposition in your action if you can avoid it. Keep your sugar and your salt in separate jars. The audience is not listening. It just becomes a lot of noise. Action is a break from exposition. And what we were talking about earlier, exposition is a consequence of plot. Exposition is the stuff that's in the movie. I personally do not wake up in the morning looking for reasons to write more exposition in my movies. It's the first act of Final Reckoning, which a lot of people had a problem with because of how much exposition is in it. That's all stuff that you needed in the movie for the big giant action sequences to work at the end of the movie without any exposition in them whatsoever. It's there. That's why that movie balances out the way it does. Yeah, there's a lot of exposition in the beginning. There are also giant action sequences in Act 2 and Act 3 of that movie. They work because we do the heavy lifting. If they work, I should say, they work because we do the heavy lifting of teaching you to be Ethan Hunt. We're in Top Gun Maverick. The whole movie is just teaching you to fly the mission at the end of the movie.
Right.
It's 2 hours of how to fly this particular mission and how to learn. You're going to learn what all the pros and cons, all the negatives and all the obstacles are, so that at the third act of the movie, when they're happening, there's very, very, very little exposition. The only exposition is about the variables that have suddenly been thrown at them. But the audience, because they've been so painstakingly educated, when things go wrong, they get to just lean in and say, oh shit, that's not supposed to be happening. That's what's putting you in the cockpit with the pilots. It's not where the camera is. It's not aesthetic things that you'd think they will be. It's where we put the exposition so that you could enjoy the action. And then the other big critical thing, and it's in the question, is character. Action is character.
Right.
And the essence of any action scene in a genre movie goes back to what we were saying. You sign a contract with the audience. You're telling the audience the kind of movie they're going to get. You know how Mission Impossible is going to end with a degree of certainty. Some people might die. There's one guy that's going to walk away from this. And because there's got to be another one, and there's got to, the rule, and we've come to expect it because we've come to expect with genre films that there are going to be many of them. You go to Harry Potter knowing, if you've read all the books, you know, I know exactly what's going to happen to Harry Potter. What you don't know is, I know it's going to turn out well. I don't know how it's going to turn out well. And when you're presenting action sequences in such a way that I cannot imagine how this will end well, and also end well in a way that I don't feel cheated. Part of the suspense you're feeling, part of the leaning in when you're watching a good movie the first time, is, please don't blow this. You've got me. At what point are you going to let me down? That's a big responsibility in terms of action.
For sure. And I think what's interesting about how the two of you approach exposition is you often have characters in like mid-argument, getting in very
Mhm.
late into the scene. Is that a trick that you picked up just from writing technique or from just working on films?
Doing
I
it
just
wrong.
try not to bore myself.
Okay.
I find exposition when it's just exposition with two calm people in a room is about as boring as it can get. So I would
Absolutely.
always rather it is pulled out of each other.
Yes. And what you learn when you direct your own writing is that if I write it this way, this will turn into standard coverage. At a certain point, they will just be sitting there talking to one another. Whereas if I eliminate all of the most unimportant stuff, how can I do this so that they're moving? How can I do this so that they're, and a great guy to study for that is Steven Spielberg, the way Steven Spielberg has the camera constantly moving and shoots in oneers, but they're not self-conscious oneers. They're efficient oneers. He actually does it so that he can shoot faster and shoot more cheaply. But those scenes are written so that they can be shot that way. It's not like Steven Spielberg just takes a scene and goes, now let's just do it all as a oneer. No, you have to write it in such a way. You have to eliminate everything that is
Yeah, I mean, but look at like Jurassic Park. I mean, David Koepp's script for that is so insanely great. There is an absolutely necessary shit ton dump of exposition at the beginning of that movie. You have to have it.
Right.
But between the two of them, I mean, two of the greatest, it's so pleasant to fucking watch because the camera is always moving. The characters are literally moving. They're in chairs that rotate. They don't just stay in the chairs that rotate. They get the fuck out of the chairs that rotate, which speaks to
Right.
character, speaks to who they are. Like all of it is constantly dynamic and moving and flowing. So that yes, it's this boring presentation, but even the boring presentation, you're seeing the cuteness of Hammond there in front of himself. Like it's all just deliciously character driven, specific, dynamic, moving, and never ever boring.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the flip side. You take a movie like Conspiracy, Frank Pearson's Conspiracy, which is about the Wannsee Conference. It's 12 men sitting around a table with very, very little in terms of a break. There are a couple of moments where they take a pause and get up from the table and break off into separate groups, but a great deal of the movie is just sitting around a table, not a lot of stunty camera work, but the writing is impeccable. The writing is so compelling. And what they're talking about is so chilling and so disturbing that Frank Pearson understood, I don't need music. I don't need lots of flashy camera moves. The more presentational I make this, the more gripping and emotional it will be. It's recognizing that there are times when moving the camera becomes distracting. There are times when the efficiency of putting two ideas together to make the scene shorter, you don't feel either of the big ideas. So and that all comes back to that same thing, which is you have to be able to step outside of your work and look back at it as a person. You have to be the audience. You just have to be able to look at it and say, am I really engaged? Am I really paying attention?
And to that point, being the audience, like Christina was saying, I think what works really well with that Jurassic Park scene is that we are them. No one in that scene is ahead of us. The audience is right there in their seats. And I think the two of you seem to do that very well in your films.
Well,
One last question, because I have a dog to walk, if that's okay. How do you address notes with your A-list collaborators when you see a scene or moment differently? I think they're asking, how do you tell Tom Cruise no?
Yes, if.
Right.
Well, I get asked all the time if Tom and I ever argue. And the answer is yes, we argue every day on your behalf. There's no pride of authorship. There's no I'm biting my tongue because I'm about to go down a path. The myths around what a director's job is, what a director's responsibility is, and and what is the domain of the director. I don't subscribe to the majority of it.
Gotcha.
The belief that something is not authentic if it's not coming from the vision of one specific person is a lot of horseshit. It's a lot of horseshit. And the truth of the matter is that the most control I've ever had over a movie is when I made no effort to maintain control over that movie whatsoever.
Wow.
That the more I let go of control, the more control tends to come back to me as the writer, more as the writer than as the director, because I'm the guy keeping the story all straight in my head. But also because Tom and I both are firmly of the belief I'm not making the movie and he's not making the movie's making the movie. The story is going in a direction it's going to go, and you can fight it if you want. You're going to get to Arizona, and the first test audience is going to tell you, no, didn't like it. And so Tom, who's been doing it a very, very, very long time, and comes to things with very strong opinions, and there have been times when he's absolutely certain and adamantly correct about what it is, and then the test audience just rejects it. And Tom will call you the next morning, having read all the cards, having sat in the test audience. He's there. He goes to the screenings. He does it all. Jack Reacher. He wanted Rosamund Pike and Tom. He wanted the two characters to kiss at the end of the movie. He wanted it to be a romance. First test audience, he goes, boy, that kiss has got to go.
Yeah.
I said, but Tom, like, I can recut it. I can use different music. We can take one. He goes, dude, read the cards. Kiss has got to go. They hate it. They just don't want it. It's just the movie didn't earn it, and they don't want it. With that, you have absolute security with the person with whom you are partnered, because you know this guy is not going to push anything on me just because it was his idea. Now, he will drive very, very, very hard to execute something that he sees, something that he believes very strongly in, but he will also on set look at that thing and go, huh, that didn't work. And then just say, thank you very much for indulging me in that, and abandon it right then and there. That is rare. There are.
I was about to say that is a real luxury and it is rare, but I do think that indulging it sometimes is the answer. Like, and I weirdly, I think this last question is the same as the first question, which is how do you deal with notes from executives? You have to actually hear them. Like sometimes you're lucky and your actress, Margot Robbie, and she's the smartest, most wonderful collaborative person in the world, or Tom Cruise, who's uber brilliant at this. Sometimes it's kind of an asshole who's famous because they look good or whatever it is. But you still have to hear them. You have to hear why they want the thing, what it is that they're trying to say, even if they're saying it in the dumbest way imaginable. Hear them out, try it. Yes, and to Christopher's point, like give it a beat, try it, let them see what it looks like so that they can then say, even if they don't want to admit they were wrong, so that they can see it and maybe be like, oh, I have another brilliant idea, and just let them find their way.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
that is the thing that it will, one of two things will happen when Tom comes to me with something that I just don't get. I don't see it. It's not my style. It's not my taste. One of two things happens. Either I discover a way to make it mine, make it in a way that it works for me, or Tom will say, that didn't work. Thanks very much for trying. But most of the humor in Mission Impossible, a great deal of the humor is Tom's humor. It's Tom coming to things with it, and Tom is the one always looking to find ways to make things funnier and more fun. Tom is also rare in that Tom is not afraid to look afraid. He's not afraid to look foolish. He's not afraid to look vulnerable. He's not afraid to give all the power in the scene to the woman that he's with. And he understands inherently that as the star of the movie, he has responsibilities as a leading man, but he also has natural benefits as a leading man that are best served if he serves everybody around him. And that is very, very, very rare. And my job as a director, when not working with someone like Tom, is to look at the scene with that kind of overview.
Right.
And be looking all the time at, when you look at the pool room in Top Gun Maverick, that is a 12-page scene with a musical number There are two characters who aren't on screen that are very, very important. You're introducing a woman that he's allegedly had a 30-year relationship with who wasn't in the previous film. There are 3 or 4 pop songs that are working as score. It's more complicated than any action scene I've ever shot in my entire life. It's a vastly, vastly, vastly complicated scene that's all about building a pyramid of trust around all of these characters, so that I'm creating a sense of family among these pilots, and I'm creating an affinity for all these pilots before Miles Teller walks in the room. Because if the audience doesn't like Miles Teller, the movie doesn't work. And if he doesn't like Maverick, I don't like him. And the only thing that makes me like him is that all these pilots I like seem to like him. Understanding that, understanding all of those mechanics, understanding the empathy and the sympathy and the emotional tone, and Tom Cruise having the kind of intuitive sense to know this song that's playing, it's starting when you cut to Glenn Powell. The song should start when we're on Jen Connolly.
Wow.
Don't wait to cut to Glenn before. Have this music change should be on Jen Connolly, because it then gives Jen the emotion that you're getting from that. That's how granular we get with it. It's whose emotions must I be affixed to moment by moment in the scene. Where Maverick is sitting in the bar is specific to the fact that Maverick is not in much of the scene, but must always feel as though he is. So Maverick is seated in such a way that you believe he's watching everything that's happening. So even though he couldn't possibly hear the pilots talking on the other side of the room at the pool table, it feels as though he does. It keeps him in the scene. You never lose first person point of view, ever. Joe Kosinski wanted an establishing shot of the bar when you came from the previous scene to that scene. And Tom and I just kept saying, you can't have an establishing shot. And Joe, quite rightly, wanted the movie to breathe. He wanted the movie to expand. But we said, you got to carry the energy from the scene with John Hamm into the scene in the bar. Otherwise, it's a reset. And I'm having to spend precious energy getting that up. You're just cutting to a bar. Sure enough, you cut to the outside of the bar later. There was a time when to do it. So it was understanding, yeah, there are all these rules, but the rules don't have to happen in the order that I think they have to happen in. And the only thing that matters in this bar is that I care about all these characters. I could do an entire year of film school on the framing of the pilots in that bar and how they're all introduced, how they're standing, why Monica Barbaro is standing where she's standing, and why the camera is where it is, so that you understand that Monica Barbaro, who is a foot and a half shorter than everybody in the room, is the most powerful character in the frame. Everything is done by design to create affinity and to create an emotional connection to characters in a hierarchy with her on top.
Wow.
If you go back and watch the scene with that in mind, that's a primer in how to write a dialogue exposition scene that's actually an action scene. It's being treated as an action scene. It's actually a stage play with a musical number in it.
Yeah.
All of that stuff that's happening in there is very, very meticulously engineered to create affinity. And that's something that you don't hear about. You will always be tasked by an executive to solve problems. You will always be tasked by an executive to solve problems, and they are predominantly problems of logic and reason. And those are all things that make sense in terms of their ability to pitch that screenplay to their boss and justify their existence, but they're not filmmakers. And your job is to process that political bullshit that you have to deal with and turn it into something emotional, turn it into something that's emotionally resonant. It took me forever to understand that. It was never articulated to me. I had to figure it out. And it was when I was lining up a shot of something inconsequential on Fallout. This is only a few movies ago. And I couldn't articulate why I couldn't make this simple insert work until I finally said, it's just not emotional. And what I realized in that moment was emotion is not something you put into a movie. It is the movie's very reason for existing. And that everything in that movie is emotional, from what a character is wearing to how the character's hair is done, to how you position the camera in relation to that camera, in relation to that actor, long before they've ever started saying anything. If the frame itself is inherently emotional, you're much farther along. What we tend to do is trust the writing. I watched 3 movies in my catching up this weekend. I watched 3 movies, and each one of the movies, I was 10 minutes into the movie and saying, you think I know who these people are. You think I know what their problems are. You are taking for granted my involvement in this story. And for everybody who understood who those characters are and is invested in them automatically, because they were invested in the IP, there are people in the audience who just, they're not feeling it. It's not happening. And that translates directly into how those movies are performing. The movies they're expressive, and they have an internal logic, and they make sense on the page. They don't resonate emotionally. They're confusing and they're exhausting. You kind of get worn out because you're just throwing all this dialogue at people and thinking that they're listening. I would urge everybody that's listening to me to prioritize dialogue as your absolute last resort. It's the last thing after music, after editing, after the lens, after the writing. That's more important is everything that you've written in between the dialogue. That's infinitely more important.
It's very helpful. Guys, I think this is like the first end credit scene to one of these panels. You guys have been so generous with your time. And I think a big takeaway is if Tom Cruise can kill his darling, so can we. When we approaches our scripts.
Yes.
Everyone, thank you so much, Chris and Christina. You guys have been so generous with your time and your insights. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Nice meeting you both. Very nice to meet you in almost in person, Christina. I'm a huge fan.
You too, me too. Thank you so much, guys.
All right, gang.
All right.
Have a good night.
Yeah,
Good night,
everybody.
Chris.
bye.